Good afternoon, everyone. And I'm extremely sorry for being delayed, but there was another session going on, and that session consumed much time because of what I got bit delayed, right? So I'm extremely sorry. My apologies for the same. Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. Once again, so in today is the day third of the history optional boot camp. And this is the day third where we are going to discuss about modern India, correct? So as far as this modern India is concerned, so as you all know that this is one of the very important segment in paper 2, history optional paper 2. And in fact, in the last two sessions, we had been discussing about ancient and medieval. And I just tried to somehow, I just tried to somehow, write down or let's say point out certain important things that you have to keep in mind when it comes to ancient and medieval. And in the same way, we will try to understand that what are the things which should be kept in mind while covering the paper 2, right? So in the beginning itself, I did tell you that when it comes to the approach towards history optional, you cannot have the similar approach towards everything, towards every area. Rather, you have to have the different approach, correct? So when it comes to the approach what we had been discussing, specifically in just a second, fine. Okay, so yeah, I was just discussing when it comes to ancient India and medieval India, there you need to follow a different approach. The way I did tell you that as far as ancient India is concerned, there you need to be very conceptual. And I'm frankly speaking, if your concepts are not very sound in paper one, so you cannot paper one specifically in the ancient side, right? In that case, unfortunately, you won't be able to deal or the cater the right requirement of the paper. That's why, while covering ancient India, focus more on the concept part. Now, what is this concept? Everything which is happening in paper, everything which was happening basically in ancient times. So there you have to understand with respect to everything, the various concepts, and these concepts could be understood with respect to the various models, right? Such as what are the major things which are happening. So there you can talk about basically the state formation, the urbanization, right? And the development of the society, the classification of society, the various sort of stratification coming into the society, either you say caste or you say class, so these are various things which are developing ultimately within it, right? Fine, कोई problem है? Fine. So these are the various things what we had discussed in paper one, specifically in ancient part. When it comes to the medieval part, in the medieval part, I just tried to discuss something else. And there I did tell you that in medieval, you need to go more to the fringes, right? More to the peripheral areas rather than covering the core, because the way medieval had been mostly understood with respect to Sultanate and Mughal, that is not being applicable anymore, too much. Rather, you can find that they have started picking up the questions from the regional areas, from the regional powers, from the regional art and culture. So these kind of things are somehow gaining more significance in paper in medieval part. So this is what you need to keep in mind. Now, how to see this modern India, right? Now this is also a very important part, and in fact many of the people try to answer three questions from the model, right? But there are basic things, certain basic things that you have to keep in mind. And sometimes I'm being asked this question that what if I'm covering only few units, because I'm attempting or I'm willing to attempt only two questions, I'm not interested in getting into or attempting all the three questions from this part. So what is the problem if I've been attempting only two questions, and I am highlighting or I'll be highlighting only on few units, and that's how I want to cover it, right? Now, what is the problem in this? There is a very simple problem that when you talk about the modern India, since there are certain compulsory questions, right? There are certain compulsory questions. Now, when it comes to the compulsory questions, let me tell you first the significance of compulsory questions. I should have ideally discussed about the compulsory questions in medieval only, but that somehow I skipped this part. Let us understand this here, because in what happens in paper one, map is a very important area. It is a compulsory part. And since I told you that map will be covered in the last session after the world history, so there I'll discuss about the strategy for the map and everything. But then map is a compulsory question, and that's why you are not having any choices. You need to cover it. But what in paper two, basically what happens in paper two, there are five questions which are coming from this part. In the compulsory questions, there are 5 into 10. That is the bifurcation of the marks. If you think that out of these 5 questions, if I have been skipping one, let's say you attempt, you did not attempt one question, in that case you are just losing 10 marks. If your perception is this for history optional paper, then it is a wrong perception. Why it is a wrong perception? Because it is not about just leaving one question. What happens? They are made as compulsory. If they are made as compulsory, there must be some meaning behind it because of what it is made compulsory. And what is the meaning behind it? Basically, when it comes to when it comes to the compulsory questions, these are the questions which are evaluated first. And since these are the questions evaluated first, that's how rest of your performance, right, is very much depending on your performance in the compulsory questions. By after evaluating the compulsory questions, somehow the evaluator tries to understand that what is your actual understanding of the modern segment, or let's say world segment for that matter, or even the medieval also. So they try to understand your hold over the subject, and that's how the compulsory questions becomes very important. So what happens if you try to cover the syllabus unit wise and you skip certain parts and you focus on certain areas? That could be done. Why it could be done? Because there are certain areas which are less important. But the problem is that since these compulsory questions are having a greater weightage, and that's how you have to attempt all the questions. And not only you need to attempt all the questions, at the same time in the compulsory questions you have to perform pretty well also. Then only you can think of getting better marks. So that's how it is very important. Problem is this: when it comes to the compulsory question, now this is being asked from all the parts of syllabus. It is not it is not included in the unit in such a way that okay, you have done 4 units out of 12, or let's say 14. So you have done 4 units and you are hoping of attempting 3 questions from those 4 units. If this possibility was there, that would be literally great. But then unfortunately this possibility is not there, because it is ultimately spread in the whole syllabus, and that's why you have to cover the whole syllabus in a pretty well manner. And if you have seen the syllabus, in that case you all will be able to realize that the syllabus has been given in a very vast manner, and there are multiple things which have been given here. Though it seems to be vast, but then it is also good for you, that ultimately each and every topic or the subtopic which seems to be important, they have been already given in the syllabus. So that somehow provides you the boundary within which you need to play. Correct? So the first thing that you have to keep in mind, that the compulsory questions are very important, and since they are coming from all the parts of syllabus, and that's how you have to cover it in a pretty well manner. Now the second thing, what you have to keep in mind, specifically this is a suggestion for the whole paper too, that when you cover paper one, it is different in nature. In paper one, what happens? In paper one, I basically used to say that here the vertical study is being done, right? So here the chronological study, chronological study is being done by you. So you study period wise, you study period wise. Okay, this is the IBC period, Vedic period, Mahajanpada period, Mauryan, post-Mauryan, Gupta, post-Gupta, early medieval, and then so on. So here you study the things period wise, and that's how it is a vertical study. So in vertical study, what happens? You need to understand the changes, or the continuity happening from one area to another area, or one period to another period, and that's how you need to go vertically, right? And you have to understand the changes which are happening in this way. And frankly speaking, if we'll talk about the questions being asked in paper one, sometimes they have been asking the question in terms of time, if from this period to this period, what kind of changes can be noticed, or what are the important transformations which were there. So that's how here the things are moving in a very different manner. But the moment it comes to paper two, paper two, here you do not study the syllabus in such a vertical manner, but the syllabus had been provided to you in a horizontal manner, right? So here I used to say one thing. What is it? It is basically the horizontal study. Now what is this horizontal study? It means it is a period roughly of 250 years. Rather you say world history or the modern India, ultimately it is covering the history of 250 years. And here the things are not connected to each other vertically, right? Here the things are connected to each other horizontally. And that's why you need to understand, or you need to correlate the various topics from one area to another area, so the correlation is there. And this is how you have to understand the modern India. Those 250 years, let's say if you believe that the modernity started somewhere from 1750s, that is the period which is considered to be the period of transition. That cannot be said happened only during 1850 1750s. We can say more or less that in 18th century this transition was happening. So since then to 20th century, or let's say 21st century also, or let's say 2000, right? This is the period what you need to cover. That roughly is 250 years. So within those 250 years, the things are not vertically connected, rather the things are horizontally connected. When I'm saying horizontal connection, so it doesn't mean that the things are only related to India. Rather, I'll say that things were basically related to world also. So some of the developments which are happening in Europe, right, that was having an impact over India. If I'll discuss about some of the changes happening in America, that was also having an impact over India. African changes were also having impact. So basically what happens, since the world was converting into a sort of global village during this particular period, it was all because of the colonization and all. And that's how the impact of the various phenomena happening in different parts of world were even leaving impact over the various parts of the various parts of India. Fine. So this is how, like, here you what you need to keep in mind is the horizontal study. That is the most important thing. Fine. So before you start studying the medieval or even for that matter the world history, you should always keep in mind that here the linkages are very important. And that's how always, while reading something, close your eyes and then imagine ki, okay, this whether is it possible to connect it with the other events happening parallelly. So you always try to understand the things with respect to the circumstances. And while considering the circumstances, never ever think of only the things which are happening in India. Rather, you should also try to cover the things which were happening in the rest of the parts of world also. That would be the best way of covering the syllabus of modern India. But then it is a sort of very in general suggestion that I have been giving you. Now, if it comes to the suggestions, as per the syllabus, so for that we have to go to the syllabus and we have to see that what are the things which are important in the syllabus and how the syllabus should be covered. And then towards the end of the session, the way we had been doing it in the previous session, I'll be coming up with some of the the crude ideas or some of the important ideas what you need to incorporate while covering the modern Indian syllabus. So let's go into that part. Now, when it comes to the this sorry, okay, when it comes to modern India, right, I have just given this name ki unfolding modern India, the perspectives, narratives, right, and the dimensions. Now, this is very important, and there is a significant meaning of each and every term that I have given you here, and that's why you have to be very careful here. Look, when you had been studying paper one, at that point of time, the question which is being a question which were asked to the historians, or in a reverse manner, that what are the questions what historians are asking to the sources, they used to be very different. And when it comes to the paper two, the questions which are being asked by the historians, they are very different in nature. When it comes to the ancient India, mostly ancient India and to a certain extent even the medieval India, most of the time the historians were asking the questions about the historicity. The first question is about the historicity and the second question is about the interpretation. Now in paper 2 what happens, the historicity does not remain the primary question. Rather what happens, the various sort of interpretation of a particular phenomena or the event going on, that becomes the most important question. Because here, as I've already discussed, that since the sources are present in such a way or such a manner that the historicity does not remain the question, and that is why the historians have been giving the interpretation, in fact I'll say multiple interpretation of a single event, and that's how I can say the perspectives become very important. Now while talking about the perspective, you should also keep in mind, if you believe that the perspectives are not changing, in that case you are in a wrong in a wrong thinking. Basically, when it comes to the perspectives, frankly speaking, the perspectives are as such which are very frequently changing, and there are a couple of areas in modern India, right, like yet good number of writings are yet going on. And since these new writings have been giving a sort of new dimension to understand that particular topic, and this is the reason because of what the perspectives are becoming very important. Now as far as this perspective is concerned, that can be simply understood with respect to one thing, one thing, this perspective is nothing but what it is, it can be called as simply the historiography, right? But when it comes to historiography, now what is the problem with you guys, that you always see the historiography with respect to the very old things, right? When it comes to historiography, you always try to see the nationalist historians, the imperialist scholar, the Marxist scholar, and then the subaltern scholar. So your journey is ending here only. But then do you believe Ranajit Guha was writing his book Subaltern Studies in 1987. So can you imagine that since 1987, it has almost covered 4 decades. So do you really believe in last 4 decades no change might have come or might have appeared in the history writing? Of course not. In world's context, the history writing has already improved a lot, and in fact they have entered into so many new dimensions. And the way Anal school is coming and they were giving a new interpretation that was later on followed by in India. So that in the same way, like there are certain other historians such as neo-imperialists, like neo-Marxists, such as revisionist scholars. So basically, history writing is a phenomena which is continuously going on, and rather I'll say it was evolving. So since it is evolving, this is the reason because of what, ultimately new kind of historiography are also coming, and this new historiography, I won't say all the topics, but then couple of topics in which mostly the historians are interested, they have been trying to cover the history with a very new perspective, and that's how the perspective terms are very important, right? Right now there are so many units in modern India where you cannot find that the questions are being asked from the same old perspectives, rather the new perspectives are being incorporated, and that's a very simple justification for this, because the same old set of people are not coming anymore to frame the questions of the UPSC. New set of people are coming, and since this new set of people have started seeing the history with a very new perspective, and that is how we can say ki perspectives are very important, and then please come out from that older perception, right? Then the second thing is the narratives, right? What is this narratives? Look, it is a sort of we can say ki discourse which is going on among the scholars. So the discourse which is going on among the scholars, which is very much dependent on the circumstances or on the things which are going on around them during the current time. So basically there are so many things which are happening in the modern times, and in fact as per that, historians are trying to understand some of the some of the important events of the past, right? So this is the reason because of what, different kind of narratives are being created for everything, and these narratives have been shaping the direction of the history, specifically of the modern India. And then finally, it comes to the dimensions. That is not very different from the perspectives. Rather, we can say it is very much part of the perspectives only. But then there are new dimensions which are being hunted by the scholars, and that's how these new dimensions are becoming important for you. So, while understanding modern India, these are three different things that you have to keep in mind: is perspectives, then the narrative, and the various dimensions. So, if you are having these three words in your mind, in that case, most probably you'll be having to deal with the modern Indian modern Indian history in a very different way. Fine. So let's move it. Let's go to the syllabus part. Now this is the syllabus, and this is the first unit of your syllabus. Fine. The first three units of your syllabus. Now in the first three units of syllabus, basically the first topic is the European penetration. I think if you have followed the last lecture properly, in that case you might be finding the answer of this particular area very easily. When it comes to the first part, right? Frankly speaking, when it comes to the European penetration in India, for a very long period of time, this remained as a remained a topic in modern India, correct? And the most of the questions were coming from this part was coming in the modern India. But if you'll see period wise, in that case, you all know that when the European companies have entered into India, at that point of time, Mughals were ruling. So since the Mughals were ruling at that point of time, so how come we can keep this particular development in the modern times? Now, it is showing a very old perception where it was believed that the coming of European was a phenomena which was showing the modernity. Only the coming of Europeans could not, that does not show that India has entered into modernity. If they are coming and they are making certain structural changes in various areas, in that case, let's say we can assume yes, India has entered into the modern period. But when Portuguese are coming, when the rest of the European companies are coming, at that point of time, either you find the Mughals, and after the Mughals, you find that so many regional powers are emerging, and these regional powers have been these regional powers are basically having a sort of either friendly relationship or else a sort of contradictory relationship with the European powers, and probably that frames or that creates the base on what the modernity gradually started coming, and that's how we can say that this particular topic should be understood in a very different way. So now the way the questions from this part has started shifting to which part, medieval India. अब यहाँ से ज्यादा क्वेश्चंस आपको मॉडर्न इंडिया में नहीं पूछ रहे बल्कि medieval इंडिया में पूछ रहे हैं, and in fact this trend had started, and frankly speaking this is one sentence I kept on telling the students since since very long, that as far as this part is concerned, try to include them in the medieval India, because somehow this is more medievalistic in nature rather than modern in nature, and that's what prepared. Like now the way they have asked the question based on Asam Jahi dynasty, or they have asked the question on Portuguese in the medieval part, that this is a clear indication for that. और ये बात मैं बहुत पहले से कह रहा हूँ या आपको इस पार्ट को उधर ले जाके पढ़ना चाहिए. Anyways, like that's not very important. Frankly speaking, there are lesser possibility of question from this part, and that's why don't pay proper attention to it. Whatsoever you have studied in the medieval segment, that's fair enough. You are not supposed to do some do an extensive study on this part. Okay, moving to the next part. So from here you should become serious for the you should become serious for the modern syllabus. Now there are few things keep in mind when it comes to the British expansion in India. Now, frankly speaking, it seems to be very important. It is important, right? It is important. But then you should also know that this is one area where there is no greater scope for the newer studies. Now, nobody is, frankly speaking, since I belong to the academic side, I know that nobody right now is studying the Carnatic Wars or the Palasi War, or let's say the French War, the Anglo-French War, or let's say Anglo-Maratha War. Maybe the Marathas are important, but then frankly speaking, they are also not something somehow very important that the people, the modern day historians are getting into that. There are only few topics in modern India in which the modern day historians are interested. And I'll tell you that what are those topics, but most of the works are yet going on, or the new works are coming. And in fact, in these areas, you need to prepare pretty well. So this is a very traditional kind of topic. And in fact, if I'll say that one question is more or less coming every year, and the questions are coming from the major political power, such as you can talk about Bengal or the Battle of Palasi. Then it comes to Mysore, then Maratha, then Punjab, then Karnataka. Right, these are the various regional powers on what questions are coming, and you can always expect one question. Since there are so many regional powers and the wars that you have to cover, and that's why you cannot pay proper attention. आप बहुत डिटेल में नहीं जा सकते हैं, और मुझे नहीं लगता है कि something something in a very detail is even needed. क्या करना है पढ़ के, there's nothing as such which is very important because of what you should go into much sort of detail. Avoid that part. So you just collect information. You collect information on them in such a way that you can answer those questions. Though sometimes they are becoming bit innovative in this part, and they are twisting the questions also. But when it comes to the twisting questions, what is the reason behind it? Because now they are doing some innovation, right? But then twisted questions are also not very tough for you to take up with, because that can be done. So that's why don't pay proper attention to it, right? Moving to the next part is the early structure of the British Raj. This is the third part. Now, this is the third unit, and frankly speaking, the third unit, there is nothing new in the third unit. Earlier also, historians have talked a lot about this third unit, and they have talked a lot about this third unit. And when it comes to understanding modern India, so I think that provides you the base for understanding, that provides you the base for understanding the colonization and why the people have started resisting the colonization, that you can understand with respect to this. But at the same time, I should say, do you have something new to talk about here? Frankly speaking, not. But here also they are trying to become bit innovative. And what sort of innovations can be noticed here? So here you can find, if you'll see the questions, now there are more ideology based questions were coming. Okay? The ideology or ideologies based questions are coming. What are the ideologies that I have been talking about? The ideologies simply mean that let's say the Orientalist ideology, the evangelical ideology, the utilitarian ideology. So you can find that the questions are being asked on the same thing, but then they're being twisted and they have been connected with the ideologies. So now other part is becoming important, and the factual information on those things, such as when you talk about diarchy, that diarchy should be always connected. Diarchy or Warren Hastings should be always connected to the Orientalism, right? When it comes to the various changes happening in the British education system, that should be connected with what? That should be, or that could be connected with basically the utilitarian philosophy, or Anglicist philosophy. So here, you have to understand it with respect to ideologies. And if you see the nature of the questions that have been asked in last 4 or 5 years, frankly speaking, this is what I have this is what I have realized, that they are asking the questions more on the basis of ideologies, rather than they were asking the very factual kind of questions, right? So that's why these are a couple of things that you have to keep in mind in the first 3 units. Let's move to the next one. Now the next unit, or the fourth one, is basically the economic impact of the British colonial India. Now there we had been, in the last unit we had been studying what? We had been studying basically the administrative policies, what they have been bringing. And in their administrative policies, there are a couple of areas like army is there, and then civil services are there. They might be important, which earlier were not very prominent topics. So certain new institutions and certain ideologies that you have to keep in mind, nothing else, like, so don't like stuck yourself in this particular part. Then it comes to the economic impact of the British colonial rule. Now those topics at one point of time used to be very, very, very important. And what was the reason because of what they were so important? Because mostly you have seen that the Marxist scholars were taking greater interest in this particular part, because either it comes to commercialization, or else it comes to drain of wealth, or else it comes to, let's say, the commercialization of agriculture, deindustrialization, the railways and various things. They were taking great interest, and they had been doing a sort of very critical study on them. Fine. But then what happened further? Now again I'll say when it comes to these kind of studies, frankly speaking, there is no greater scope to do something very new. And that's the reason because of what I can say, that when you have been covering this part, so you cannot cover it only with that Marxist perspective. Rather, when it comes to this particular topic, here a sort of revisionist studies had become more popular. Now, the revisionist scholars have been studying the things with a very different perspective, and they are coming up with a very new and fresh interpretation. And in fact, I'll say the conclusion also for these topics. Now, their interpretations or the conclusions remain very different as per, compared to the previous conclusions or the previous interpretations. And this is the reason because of what, here you should talk more about, here you should study more about that revisionist scholars. Now, what sort of scholars are falling in the category of revisionist scholars? So I can say in the revisionist category, you can talk about Amia Bagchi, Spaker is there, right? The Sahid Amin is there. These are a couple of scholars. They have given a fresh interpretation to everything, and that's why you should study these things, these things with this perspective. But yet, I should say one more thing when it comes to that economic history of modern India. Frankly speaking, this is also one area where in last 2 decades there was no fresh work has come. यहाँ पे भी पिछले 2 डेकेड से आपको नहीं लगता है कि बहुत ज्यादा नए काम आए हैं, और उसका इम्पैक्ट भी आपको यहाँ पे दिखता है कि देयर इज नो ग्रेटर चेंज दैट यू कैन फाइंड इन दिस पार्ट. फाइन. So that's why, when it comes to the economic impact, mostly you focus on the debates. And in fact, when it comes to these debates, try to somehow comprehend or try to somehow incorporate the revisionist studies which have done recently, two decades back or 3 decades back. And in fact, your answers should definitely include those kind of fresh interpretations of those topics. Nothing else could be done. Okay, fine. And in fact, one more thing that you should understand, that here, when it comes to these areas such as economic impacts, when it comes to revenue settlements and then deindustrialization and all these things. Now, what happened earlier? It was mostly seen in terms of debate, right? So it was mostly seen in terms of debate. So deindustrialization debate is very popular. When it comes to, let's say, commercialization of agriculture, so that debate is very popular. Drain of wealth, the debate was very popular. Earlier, it was mostly seen with respect to debate, and that is interesting also. I am not saying that, but now since they need to ask the smaller dimensions, and that is how they have started picking up just one point, and they have started framing the question. So now they are not getting into the whole sort of topic. Rather, they are just picking up one point, or one dimension, and they started framing the question over it. So this is how, while studying deindustrialization, commercialization, all is a drain of wealth, all is a revenue settlement, right? In every such kind of topics, now every single or the minor topic does have the possibility of the question, and that's why when you cover the topic from this particular area, or you cover these topics, frankly speaking, what you need to keep in mind that yes, when you read the interpretation, go bit deeper into that. राइट ऐसा नहीं कि आप उसने पढ़ लिया कि डी इंडस्ट्रियलाइजेशन व्हाट आर द कॉजेस फॉर द डी इंडस्ट्रियलाइजेशन व्हाट आर द मेजर आर्गुमेंट्स फॉर द डी इंडस्ट्रियलाइजेशन यू कांट सी इन दिस वे दिस वन आर्गुमेंट लेट्स से let me give one example such as if you talk about the absentee landlordism, right? Now absentee landlordism is one of the reason for the negative outcomes of the permanent settlement, but then you should always think that a separate question may be asked to you on only absentee landlordism, right? Or let's say the Jotedari thesis. That's a very popular thesis by Rajat Ray and Rat Lekhare. Now, Jotedari thesis, is one topic which is very important, and in fact, there's a whole debate pertaining to it. So, a separate question can be asked to you on Jotedari thesis. So, you have to be ready. So, while reading the permanent settlements or while reading the other economic topic, don't see it in this way. This is a whole topic. Rather, from this particular topic, there are many minor dimensions could be plucked, and they could be framed in in form of questions, and they could be asked to you. So that's how, whenever you have been covering the economic topics, this is the approach what you are supposed to follow in this particular part, right? So that's all about this economic part. Let's move to the next part, and that is about the social and cultural development, and specifically the topic which is there. It is very important is about the education system, right? But then look at the statement, the state of indigenous education. Matlab, what was the state of indigenous education? That is the Orientalist Englishist controversy, and then introduction of the Western education in India. Then the press is there, literature is there, correct? And then public opinion, the rise of modern vernacular literature, progress of science, the Christian missionaries, and the missionary activities in India. Now, if you'll see this particular part, frankly speaking, there are so many possibilities of questions are there. And in fact, these kind of topics are gradually becoming important. Like look at in every word, single word which is given, or every single topic which is given here, they are having the possibility. And in fact, these are the areas where you can find that more works are taking place in these days, such as education, right? Or every peripheral things related to education can be framed in form of questions. So it's very important. And then you should cover Christian missionaries. Earlier, this was one topic which was not given due importance. Now it is being given importance, so you should cover. And in fact, recently I know that at least two or three important authors, those who have published their book on the same thing, that how come the Christian missionaries had contributed in the development of Western education. I know personally them, so that's why I can say. And in fact, these books become so popular. So it is quite obvious that a question, if those kind of people are getting the chance to enter into UPSC, of course they'll frame a question on this. So what I'm trying to suggest you, that this is one topic which is related to education and society, that remains very important. That remains very important. And in fact, you should try to cover it with that particular perspective. Okay. So here you need to open up your dimension as the in the as I suggested in the previous topic. Okay. There is one more thing, right, that I would suggest here. Okay, when it comes to all these developments, don't see it only with respect to or don't see them very factually. Okay, there is a state of indigenous education. I should have the 10 points on the education. No, I think that would be incorrect to see these topics. Why? Again, I told you that horizontal study. So try to connect it with the various other developments happening in Europe precisely, and then India. So then you will be able to somehow understand it in a better way. And how? I'll be just giving one example to make you understand. This is the period when the various ideologies were appearing in Europe, and these ideologies had started playing a greater role in shaping the colonial policies in India. And that's how the evaluator must be expecting for the sake of just one word, or let's say one sentence, if you have been adding on that, that is undoubtedly increasing the weightage of your answer. So basically here that horizontal studies must be working a lot, because this press can be related to education, right? The press can be related to the development of science, the Christian missionaries can be related to the education, and everything could be connected to each other. And if you are able to connect the topics in this way, in that case undoubtedly you are in a somehow better situation or the better position. Okay, fine. So when it comes to this part, again you need to be very careful here. And then it comes to the next one, that is social and the religious reform movement in Bengal and other areas. Now again I'll say this is one area where so many recent works are going on. There were so many prominent scholars like Partha Chatterjee is there, Anand, Ashish Nandi is there, then this fellow, Sekhar Bandyopadhyay is there. These are all those scholars who had been working, yet they are active and they have been working on it. And this is how the social reformation movement is one topic which is very prominent. And if you'll see the questions, if you have the compilation of the question at one place, otherwise you can download it from our website, which is there. So you can find one thing, number of questions are increasing from this part. But if we'll talk about the nature of the questions, from these topics, frankly speaking, the nature of questions have gone through a sort of larger change. Earlier, what kind of questions were coming? Earlier, the questions were pretty simple in nature. Either they were simply asking in this way, nature of the social reformation movement, or else they had been asking the question on precisely a single reformer. Okay, this reformer discussed something about this reformer. But right now, they have made the questions more ideology based, right? So more ideology based. Matlab, they have connected the social reformation movement with multiple things which were going on. And this is the reason because of what? I can say that so many innovative questions, the way they have been connecting it with a universalism, the way they had been connecting it with a rationalism, the way they have been connecting it with the various religious philosophies appearing in West and India. So again, it is having so much connections, the way it was getting connected with the nationalism, the way it was getting connected with the communalism. So kind of like, connections that you find here, that gives that scope to the historians who can write over it on multiple dimensions. And this is the reason because of what, like, again here you need to spread little bit yourself, right? And you should prepare it in such a way that you can cater the requirements of the, like, the questions in the paper, right? So this is a very important part of your syllabus. And as I told you, that check out the questions that have been asked in last 4 or 5 years, and we'll find that the questions have become very innovative, like, as compared to the previous questions, which are very simple and factual in nature. So that, like, is somehow helping you to deal with the topic in a very different particular different manner. Okay. After the social, acha, one more thing, sorry, I missed to tell you that here, when it comes to the questions are very conceptual in this part, right? Now, this is also like you should keep in mind. It's very conceptual in nature. Conceptual in nature. Now, what is the meaning of being conceptual in nature? Look, social reformation could be noticed, could be studied in two different ways. Like, I'm just taking one example. The social reformation movement, as I told you, that you studied the reasons behind the social reformation movement, you studied the nature of the social reformation movement, and then you, like, studied the outcomes of the social reformation movement, whether it failed or it was successful. Now, this is one way of studying it. Then the second way of studying it, as I told you, that it could be connected to the various other dimensions, and that's how your concept should be very clear. And, like, let me make it more simple to you. If you read the book of Shekhar Bandyopadhyay, from Palasi to Partition and After, then you'll realize one thing is sometimes a single statement that has been given in the book, that has been framed in form of question, and this is asked to you. And there are at least 10 such opportunities you can find to, like, you'll be able to find such questions which are dealt in Shekhar Bandyopadhyay, maybe just in one line, maybe in couple of lines, maybe in one paragraph, and they have been picked from you. And that's how I'm just also suggesting the book of Shekhar Bandyopadhyay is very important. So don't read modern India very factually, rather, like, try to develop your concepts also in this particular part. Okay, fine. Let's move to the next part, and that is about the Indian responses to the British rule, right? Again, it is very like, important. And in fact, when it comes to the responses mostly you see in form of the revolts and uprisings. Now, there is no limit of these kind of revolts and uprisings, correct? And what nature I have noticed of the question, there are two things I'll precisely say here, that they, first of all, they have started asking the questions, like, which are independent questions. Independent as in, matlab, they are the, like, they are based on a independent movement. Let's say coal rebel or the coal uprising. So they have asked a separate question on coal uprising. That though makes it bit tough for you. Why? Because so many such movements are there. How to cover all these movements separately? Frankly speaking, you should not bother a lot about all the movements. Rather, you just identify 6 or 7 such movements. And frankly speaking, if you have covered those 6 and 7 uprisings, in that case, you don't need to go beyond that. Within that only, you'll be able to cover, like, or answer those kind of questions which are coming. So that's how I can say, okay, like, when it comes to the Indian responses to the British rule, undoubtedly it is important. Couple of them are mentioned in the syllabus, such as the Rangpur thing, right? The Coal Rebellion, the Mopla Rebellion of Malabar, the Santal Hul, the Indigo Rebellion, the Deccan Uprising, the Munda Rebellion. A couple of names have been given here, and frankly speaking, these are the, like, 7, 8 names, 6, 7 names I had been telling you, and I you should try to cover only these. Right? You should not get into, like, so many things. That's the reason I always keep on suggesting one thing. If you'll see the syllabus properly, now some will be able to understand that UPSC people are not crossing, or they're not going beyond the syllabus. And some, like, they have asked a question on a, let's say, independent movement, and you say, "Arey, how come it is possible to cover all the movements?" They are not asking you to cover all the movements. They have categorically given it here. Okay, these are the movements that you need to cover, including 1857, and that is what you need to cover. Like, so it's not very tricky. But then, since it is given in the syllabus, and that's the reason because of what I believe that you should, like, try to cover it in a pretty well manner. Yeah. The another thing that I have noticed in the recent questions, that sometimes they are making it very analytical kind of question. And what is the meaning of analytical? Don't try to understand the revolts or the uprisings in a very factual manner. Rather, conceptualize it. Okay, what is this? What are the circumstances? What led to, led to the development of that movement? What was the core phenomena or the feature? Whether it was organized, unorganized, whether it was getting any outsider support, what was the role of the middle class, whether they had a mobilization, whether they had the mechanism to mobilize the people or not, whether in the case of absence of any proper method of mobilization, the religion had been playing a very significant role. So if you'll frame certain questions in your mind and then you'll ask while reading that particular topic, frankly speaking, you'll find the solution of all these questions. And if you have understood any particular topic in this way, so your analysis part is done. So it is not necessary that you cover everything with respect to a couple of historians. If somebody has written, I need to cover. Not no, not needed. If the movement is there, couple of questions should be naturally there. And if these questions are there, if you'll be asking these questions while reading those topics, the job is done. So nothing else is needed in this particular one. So okay, undoubtedly it is a very important topic, and that's how I'll say it is to cover. Now it comes to the nationalism, the factors leading to the birth of Indian nationalism and the political association. When Bipin Chandra was writing the history, or his history was the most prominent one, like this used to be a very important topic. Again, I'll ask you to check the questions which were coming from this particular topic earlier and the questions which are coming in last 5 years. And again, I'll say that there were very less number of questions being asked from this part, right? बहुत lesser question, and in fact I'll say traditional question also. ले दे के कुछ limited सवाल हैं जो आपसे पूछे जा सकते हैं. वही कांग्रेस का फॉर्मेशन है, वही जो है डिबेट है कांग्रेस के फॉर्मेशन को लेके. See the extremists and the moderate, differences between the extremists and the moderate, the rise of moderate, that are very fixed in the traditional topics. And in fact, nobody is interested anymore to study this particular part. Nobody is working anymore on the moderates and the extremists, because that's the reason. Because of what I'll say, that this is a part, have a sort of brief understanding of this part, cover those traditional topics, and your job is done, right? Then it comes to next one. This is the rise of Gandhi. Again, I'll say that when it comes to the period when Bipin Chandra's book was the sort of an official history of modern India. From in that point of time, there were so many questions coming from this part. There was greater weightage given to this part, and because of what, more than one question, though it is just one unit, ideally speaking, there is no possibility of one, or let's say more than one question. But yet, good number of questions were coming from the Gandhian movement. Why? Because we always carried this perception with us. What is modern India? Nothing. It's modern India is nothing but the modern India is basically the Gandhian movement. But then, since because of the subaltern studies and the revisionist studies, we had come out from these perspectives, or this kind of this kind of understanding, and that's how the number of questions are getting less. एक तो गांधीयन मूवमेंट है जिसमें से क्वेश्चंस आ जाते हैं, नॉन कॉपरेशन मूवमेंट से क्वेश्चंस मिल जाएंगे आपको, सीडीएम से क्वेश्चंस मिल जाएगा, सिविल डिसोबीडियंस मूवमेंट से, एंड देन ऑफ कोर्स द क्विट इंडिया मूवमेंट. सो क्विट इंडिया मूवमेंट इज नॉट एनी मोर कंसिडर्ड एज द गांधीयन मूवमेंट, तो फिर इसके बारे में बहुत बात करके कोई फायदा नहीं है. सो यही दो क्वेश्चंस है जो काहे बगाहे रिपीट करते रहते हैं. They one year they ask a question on NCM, next year they ask a question on Quit India movement. But again, I'll say, as far as this particular part is concerned, right? Frankly speaking, you should not pay good attention to it, or let's say should not study a lot. Gandhi है बहुत important है. It's not necessary. You just see the Gandhian movement, where prepare them in a pretty well manner, and that's it. It's not very important. Fine. Let's move to the next one. Again, it's the constitutional development in the colonial India. Constitutional developments in the colonial India between 1885 to 1935. Now, as far as this part is concerned, there are three acts which are very important. That is 1909, 1919, and 1935. Frankly speaking, again, there is nothing new in this part to be done, right? कुछ भी नया नहीं है इसमें करने के लिए. But yet the questions are coming from this part, right? Constitutional development of India. इसमें से आप ये तीनों acts अच्छे से कर लीजिए, उसके features अच्छे से कर लीजिए, because whenever you have been writing the answer of these questions without mentioning the provisions or the features of those articles or those acts, you won't be able to do justice with the questions. Nothing new in this part. Just leave it. Come out from the next one. Then the next question is the other strands of the national movement. Now, this is one topic which is very important for last many decades, and not many decades, at least for last one decade. So what is it? It is all the influence of the subaltern studies, correct? So when it comes to the subaltern studies, and then further followed by the revisionist studies, now they have started emphasizing a lot on this part, And I must tell you that every year at least one question has to come from this particular topic every year. And in fact, in last 4 5 years, there is greater importance of this topic. And that's why here you have to see the syllabus pretty careful in a pretty careful manner, and then you can find the questions. The revolutionaries, like they are important. And then they have divided it into multiple areas such as Bengal, Punjab, and Maharashtra. Bengal, Punjab, Maharashtra, and UP. Now, since they have given it in the syllabus, so they do have the right to ask you that what sort of revolutionary developments were there in UP. Then you'll be saying, like, I don't remember anything specifically. So here you need to prepare because it is given in the syllabus. Fine. Then it comes to the left movement. Now, the left movement, specifically the socialist parties or the left movement, right? Or else we can say Bose, Subhash Chandra Bose, they all are important. And in fact, on the socialist movement also, like in past few years, I have seen good number of questions have been asked, right? So you can see that because of this subaltern studies, the other strengths. Now, when I say other strengths, there are so many other things might fall in this particular topic. तो वो आपको थोड़ा आपको जो है सेग्रीगेट करके रखना है. ओके फाइन. The next topic is basically the politics of separatism, the Muslim League, Hindu Mahasabha, communalism, and the politics of partisan and then transfer of power, independence. So ये पूरा modern India हमारा खत्म हो गया इधर, like ठीक है, it is like the last topic. Again, when you study modern India, this particular topic seems to be very important, है ना? आप ये सबका perception है. Why? Because there is good amount of writing. When it comes to Indian independence, great amount of writing you can find. When it comes to the partisan, right, great amount of writing you can find. Then we can say communalism, great amount of writing you can find. But then the point is that what is the reflection in the UPSC paper? Are they asking like so many questions from this part? Frankly speaking, you do not find so many questions from this part. Rather, like I can say that very limited on regular intervals, their questions are being asked. But the way I've been discussing about previous few topics, and I told you that every year they have been asking the question, it is not true for this part. So इतना इसमें भी आप अपनी जो है जद्दोजहद मत करिए. Don't like get yourself stuck in this particular topic. Like prepare those traditional topics and let's come out of it, right? What I have realized, as far as this last three topics are concerned, these are basically what topics? They are the post-independence topics. Now, gradually, the significance of the post-independence has increased in the syllabus, right? Pahle, hardly one question was coming from these three units, right? So out of all these units, these three units were the most ignored one, and just one question was coming. And in fact, like majority of the teachers, were not teaching it. In fact, I'll say that students were also avoiding it. But now this is one part which has been paid greater attention. Now we have come to 2024. और जब 2024 में हम हैं तो अब जो है हिस्ट्री 2000 तक एटलीस्ट like up till 2000 it has become important. And in fact, the way I did tell you that the number of questions are increasing, but here again I should say that the questions which are coming, they're again from the precisely the topics given in your syllabus. They have written everything. So on every topic, what are given here, such as foreign policy के ऊपर उन्होंने question पूछा है, ठीक है, in the China relation के ऊपर उन्होंने question पूछा है, तो इस तरीके की चीजें important है. But then yes, since you study all these parts in the GS wala area, and the way you study IR, the way you study the political developments and post-independence, social developments and post-independence. So you should try to incorporate those information here, and that's how you can frame a better answer. And frankly speaking, since there is no major historical works in this side, and that's how the way you study the general studies paper, in the same way if you cover these three topics, frankly speaking, you are finding the solution of it. So it's not very complicated, it's as simple as that. So when it comes to modern India, that's how you can see the modern India. Fine. So let's talk about the final takeaway, that what are they? Okay. What are the final takeaway that we can talk about? Okay, fine. So while doing the modern India, right? While doing the modern India, fine. Identify important areas or topics. Do not invest all of your energy to just all the topics. Rather, identify those areas and then you cover them. Okay, fine. This is the one suggestion. The second suggestion will be that you go for the horizontal studies. And it is not necessary that whenever you have been reading any book, you have you find everything it is written in a categorical manner. No, you need to ask those questions and you need to put certain effort to find the answer of those questions. Then you can find the answer of these kind of things. But then like focus on the horizontal studies. That is the second suggestion, like what I have been giving. Okay. Third is about the multiple dimension. Multiple dimensions. I have already discussed that not in every topic, but that there are certain topics where the possibility is there of multiple dimensions. So जहां पे भी आपको लगता है कि multiple dimensions cover हो सकते हैं या यहाँ से सवाल बन सकता है, वहां पे you have to become serious and you have to try to cover the multiple dimensions. Fine. The fourth, change your historiography. Change your historiography, right? And instead of covering or writing about the same old historians, now you will be focusing more on, like first of all, I'll write subalterns, and then I'll say the revisionist. आप इन दोनों पे ज्यादा फोकस करेंगे, and there you can find specifically here you can find some new names. So instead of getting a longer list or preparing a longer list of historians, because frankly speaking in modern India there is no dearth of list. और बहुत सारे historians है जो लिख रहे हैं, आपको सबके बारे में बात नहीं करनी, आपको सिर्फ किच के बारे में बात करनी, कुछ इंपॉर्टेंट लोगों के बारे में बात करनी. तो लिस्ट बहुत कंसाइज होना चाहिए, बट वो अपडेटेड होना चाहिए. That is very important. That should be there. So when you prepare, like okay, in the last suggestion, like you keep yourself like factually sounds also, because when you have been writing the answers in modern part without referring certain facts, you won't be able to prove or justify your points. And that is the reason like keep the fact very sound, such as years. You ask whether you should remember those years or not. Of course, you should like keep certain important years in your mind that you can literally produce them in your answers. So as far as like the modern India is covered, like this is how you're going to cover the modern India. And I believe that if you have covered the modern India in this way, it's easy to score in modern India part, right? So that's all for today's session. I hope like this was useful for you, and if it is like so of course try to bring those changes in your studies and prepare it in this way. Thank you very much.